It's the 30th day of September, the very last day of September. And welcome everybody. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana. And what the hell? You can call in at 709-589-4406. A little bit of a rush there to get the show on time. I'm supposed to have a black screen in the back. Oh me, oh my. Reminds me of Project Sunshine every time I see pictures like that. In 1953, the nuclear industry had doctors scavenge legs and arms off dead people and children so they can use it in nuclear testing for radioactive fallout to see how harmful it was to humans. They love you so much. They were willing to sacrifice their moral compass just for you. If you believe that, you're such a sucker. No, nuclear hates your guts. That's the reality. Should degenerate cowards, like nuclear scientists and academics, work at Fukushima someday instead of the homeless? Is that like crazy talk? Am I like going too far with it? We can't expect nuclear scientists and academics to sacrifice themselves, Dana. That came in a bit fast that time. Who knows? We got a crazy show for everybody tonight. Let's talk about last night for a second. There's a very dangerous thing going on with my videos. They're making the videos longer after 12 hours. So last night's video was 2 hours, 14 minutes. Holy crap. What was thinking? And 12 seconds. So 10 hours later, 2 hours, 14 minutes, 12 seconds. But when it hits 12 hours, it gets longer. Sometimes shorter. Last night was longer by 29 seconds. We believe they're putting software in the video after 12 hours. So if you can watch it before 12 hours, I suggest you would. I'm also regularly posting these streams each night at BitChute. They're 100 gigabyte files. It takes me a couple hours to convert it. Yay, more work. And at 15 hours, I had 169 views. At 19 hours, I had 2 more views. Holy shit, I'm killing it. God bless the nuclear industry. They love you so much. They ask so little. Just sacrifice all your children, friends, and families and loved ones so they can tell theirs that they're special. A journal. What are we going to do with journalists? I can't believe that journalism is not banned. They're actually a serial killer is the best way to describe a journalist. This was on the first 3, what's the date there? Yeah, April the 4th, 2011. So it's 3 weeks later. Plant operator dumps radioactive water into the Pacific. Now, first off, the reactors blew up. You're not going near these things in the first couple of years, minimum. And anybody that does gets a lethal dose. That's why we want nuclear scientists to work there, because they shouldn't have to suffer and live on this planet with us. As soon as they become a nuclear scientist, they should be sent to nuclear meltdowns so they don't have children, right? Because the worst thing can happen to humanity and the 8 million species is nuclear scientists having children. And goodness knows how bad that's going to turn out to be. They modified it on the same day. How interesting is that, really? Not enough laws, I guess. They started to dump 10,000 tons of radioactive water into the Pacific in the first 3 weeks. So where were they storing the water in the first 3 weeks? Like 10,000 one-ton pickup trucks? it's a lot of water we're talking about, right? Where did they store that, I wonder? Yeah. Anybody believes they're storing it is a friggin' idiot. The last resort measure came after the Bank of Japan said business confidence has plummeted. The last resort measure said they're going to dump all the radioactive water into the ocean because the Bank of Japan said business confidence has plummeted. I mean, if this is not the modus operatus of a serial killer, what actually is, I wonder? On Tuesday, France confirmed it was sending nuclear experts from the French company Areva. Well, that makes me confident. And its CEA nuclear research body to the Fukushima plant at the request of the Japanese government. Bless their hearts. There's no academics going to Fukushima. Especially back then. Even today, there's none going there. Does anybody really think that Areva, who knows how lethal that place is going to go to Fukushima? Does anybody really believe that? Leaked emails show the British government, by the way, worked with nuclear companies on public relation campaigns to downplay Fukushima, that the degree of collusion was truly shocking. It was sedition, right? EDF Energy, which is France. Areva happens to be France. Worked to cover up it. And one of those cover-ups was claiming that they were going to Fukushima, clearly. The United Nations Atomic Watchdog chief, who, bless his heart, died, thank goodness. Meanwhile, said that the 3-week-old Fukushima emergency, which Japan had predicted may last for months, like Chernobyl is still never going to stop, right? So this is infinitely thousands of times worse than Chernobyl. And IAEA is the first one to come out to protect these industries, which is UN. Means an end to a business-as-usual approach to nuclear power. And Japan has battled to prevent the full reactor meltdowns. Like, it had melted down by day 6, all the reactors and fuel pools were blown up, gone. And if the International Atomic Energy Agency doesn't understand that, which has no sovereignty over any country, by the way, they're a corporation like McDonald's, and then everybody in your government has swear allegiance to them and the corporations, but not you, not people in their country. It's unbelievable how corrupt. It's a complete corruption. But you still have to get your consent. You still have to vote for them so they can cut your throat, right? Poured thousands of tons of water onto overheating fuel rods. They're not overheated. They're long gone. You can't get near it to pour water on it, what's left of it anyway. A stopgap measure created highly radioactive runoffs. Lying on this scale can't be acceptable. Like this is not acceptable to come out as a journalist and cut everybody's throat permanently. Because they're figuratively cutting your throat. It insists that the release of the water, the equivalent of more than 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools, would not harm marine life or seafood safety. Where are they going to store that much water on the site in those first 3 weeks when they had 38 reactor cores detonate? They can't, right? There is nowhere to store the water on that site. It's the first 3 weeks. And the United Nations insisted it would not harm marine life or seafood safety. Like, they generally come across as very innocent, right? These people, you see them, they come across, my goodness, they seem like wonderful people, Dana. I don't think that these wonderful people are the monsters that you're saying they are, Dana. I just don't see that. Well, there's clearly a reason you don't see it. Because you're stupid, probably. Spokesman, another serial killer, Yukio Adano, said he never got off TV for 72 hours, I think it was. We have no choice but to release water tainted. My apologies for any pop in that one. Into the ocean is a safety measure. Well, for TEPCO, it's a safety measure for TEPCO, so their stocks don't crash, is it? As a result of the massive water dumping operations, highly radioactive wastewater is accumulated at turbine buildings. Highly radioactive water, highly radioactive wastewater, highly radioactive water has accumulated at the turbine buildings at Fukushima Daiichi, especially at Reactor 2, said another TEPCO official. So if there's highly radioactive water accumulated at the turbine buildings, you can't go near those buildings because of gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, beta rays, alphas, X-rays, blah, blah, blah. So, especially at Reactor 2. Reactor 2 was the least scary looking reactor. And when you go back to the first year, basically, first 10 years, awful lot of the media will show you a picture of Reactor 2, which is this one here, but right alongside it was Reactor 3. So which one is more scarier looking, that one or that one? I'd say that one personally, but maybe this one, I don't know. I'm a journalist, so I wouldn't know, would I? Potential, and here's another headline about that, February 12th, 2017. Potential global catastrophe, Fukushima Unit 2 highly radioactive fuel reactor could be destroyed, making Tokyo uninhabitable. And this is the most dreaded scenario. Already partially liquefying below the reactors. Unit 2. Right alongside Unit 2 was Reactor 3. And that's what I mean. These so-called... I don't know what's worse, a journalist or the scientist. They look so innocent, right? But the reality of it is their job is to cut your throat. That's their job. And you're supposed to thank them for it too, right? That would be a perfect scenario for the media. And they got a 99% plus success rate on top of that. Of hoodwinking you and leaving you to die a miserable experience. There is a need to release already stored water in order to accept the additional water totaling 10,000 tons. 10,000 tons? First off, the reactor is detonated. The call was put out, send us people who don't mind dying. Does that sound like they got it under control? Like when the reactor blows up, every nuclear scientist seen the fuel pool's reactor cores flying in the air and said, well, honey, we're not going to Japan ever, under any circumstances. Every one of them on the entire planet would have said that. Every academic in the nuclear industry would have said it for sure. Every nuclear professor would have said the same thing. We will never go to Japan. Then he come out and told you it was like a banana. Pretty nice of them, eh? Because they love you so much. Nuclear scientists are your best friends. Their job is to murder you so you can't complain about nuclear. As well as 1,500 tons of water from pits under reactor unit 5 and 6. So that would suggest the water in the pits, whatever the hell that is. I didn't know reactors had pits underneath them. Must have had some kind of criticality event. They weren't in cold shutdown, according to the evidence. Of course, they're going to tell you they were in cold shutdown, but clearly they weren't in cold shutdown. Contamination from the plant is found in the air, the ground, and the seawater. It's a little worse than that. You can't work on the site. Workers say the ground under Fukushima plant is cracking as the radioactive steam is coming up. This is incredible. It was 6 stationary Geiger counters were shown 10 sieverts per hour. That was their max they can reach. But they had to run away and leave the site for extended periods when you see anything like that. This is the China syndrome coming out of the ground, where the ground is cracked open through detonations of expansion of water. Because a liter of water will expand, I can't remember, 1,600 feet for a liter. So imagine 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, pieces of that coming in contact with water. It'll split the earth open, right? And then all this radioactive emissions will flood out, and because it's only the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society, immigrants that don't speak the language there, dead man tells no tale. And who's going to believe the homeless guy talking about working at Fukushima? Like he's on the streets back, if he survives it, I'm back in Tokyo. And he's like, oh God, I just worked at Fukushima. People are dropping dead everywhere. Everybody goes, shut up. You're a homeless. So they're perfect victims. Map shows Fukushima followed the United States. Radiation dose in the Northeast and Great Lakes were equal to the West Coast. The same here on the East Coast. Now, we've done research expeditions for 6 years, 4 to 5 months a year on the Pacific coastlines without coming home. Grueling. There's grueling species counts. Dismal. There's nothing left, which made it worse because you got nothing to look at. Nothing. There should be incredible diversity. Map shows Fukushima followed in the United States. Radiation doses Northeast and Great Lakes were equal to the West Coast. And I've done the research along the West Coast from British Columbia, Vancouver to Alaska for 6 years. I know the first year we've done it twice. It was especially grueling. So this is Medusa. I mean, the plutonium mixed oxide fuel reactor, reactor 3, detonating. And the videos, I should drag it in because we're always talking about it. Normally sitting there, the bottom model is based on 26 days of radioactive fallout. So it's an invisible snowstorm covering the entire planet. So the atomic plague is real. Products including vegetables, dairy products, beef, and most recently, wild mushrooms. So, like, you got to be incredibly, despicably evil to throw that out there. Right? Because the connotations a lot of people subconsciously take away from that statement is that the wild mushrooms are, it's not just in the farmer's field. Remember, after Chernobyl, the journalists are so good at the cover story that United Kingdom, Ireland, Scotland, United Kingdom, closed 9,400 farms after Chernobyl, which was a tiny reactor. It was a brand new reactor. It was a graphite reactor. It was still vicious. Don't get me wrong, that was vicious, and I've done entire presentations on it for many years. And it's overwhelmingly, but it ain't no Fukushima. It's one. Fukushima is equal to about at least 3,200 Chernobyls. Because at the top of each building was 8 reactor cores. The reactors are massive compared to Chernobyl. And Chernobyl was a graphite, where these reactors are pure uranium, pure plutonium. And Medusa, reactor 3, was the plutonium mixed oxide reactor, breeder reactor. This was hideously reused. They reclaimed uranium plutonium from fuel and bombs, right, and put it back in a chain reaction, which is an abomination. Because once it goes through a chain reaction, the radioactive fallout that originally covers the planet is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. So you can't perceive that. You can't smell it or hear it or feel it or taste it or touch it or pick it up or throw fucking rocks at it. You can't perceive it. Excuse the French Canadian in me here. My apologies to Google. Scumbag Google. But this is a journalist. This is an academic. For 80 years, this is the routine they've done to you. In Vienna, United Nations International Atomic Energy Agency's chief, Emmanuel, we got a picture of him just before he died. It's him that's right there. I'm sorry, that's him there. That's what he looks like without the human face mask on him. And every day I thank goodness that he's dead. So the disaster has enormous implications for nuclear power. What about the 8 million species, scumbag? The worries of millions of people throughout the world about whether nuclear energy is safe must be taken seriously, scumbag said in an opening address to a special conference on nuclear safety. So, there was 35.8% of the children in just one study in 2012 in the first year, on top of 865,000 extra cancers that Japan had in the first year, and 6 out of 10 children with diabetes in the first year. On top of that, there was 13,646 out of 38,000 children with thyroid tumors of about 2 centimeters. But the child's thyroid gland is only 1 by 2 centimeters, which meant they're producing radioactive hormones for the rest of their life. Now, pre-Fukushima, it was 1 in a million. And so when you scale it up to 1 million, this is 358,000 out of 1 million. The numbers are just unbelievable. And denial, the journalists' denial, the United Nations chief, who, thank goodness, too bad he died so suddenly, right? Too bad it wasn't a long, drawn-out death, insisted that the basic drivers behind interest in nuclear power, because you don't care about the kids, couldn't care less about the kids. Global energy demand. Yeah, well, geothermal can fill in every one of the gaps. The only thing that's stopping geothermal is nuclear. They have scuttled and demonized everything. Anything that's competition to them, they'll destroy it. And then, like this year alone, there's going to be about 660 gigawatts of just solar power, not counting wind and geothermal and all kinds of other renewables, but just solar power. And 660 gigawatts is equal to 660 large nuclear reactors coming online in 12 months. The total capacity of nuclear, 413 reactors, is only 365 gigawatts. But the problem is the fuel pools are hemorrhaging the isotopes because the fuel is still splitting atoms forever. Because when you hear nuclear is dangerous forever or for thousands of years, you'll hear that kind of narrative. They don't like using the word forever. They'll say it's dangerous for thousands of years or tens of thousands. Some of them will even acknowledge at least that much. It's deadly. The reason it's deadly is because it's still splitting the same atoms when you take it out and putting in the fuel pool with no containment as it was to boil water for 1 million homes and businesses. How many atoms do you got to split to boil a glass of water? It'll blow your mind, that number. So imagine how many they're splitting. Now, a single atom, when it's in your body attacks it for the rest of your life with white blood cells till it builds a tumor around it. And then there's 1,000 fuel pools worldwide stuffed with reactor cores that are splitting the atoms directly into the environment. And they're still so hot, they boil off. Each fuel pool boils off about 120,000 plus liters of water a day. Special water, but it's saturated now with isotopes. It goes up to tall, skinny stacks on the site, and that's why the majority of nuclear power plants worldwide are surrounded by farms. if you start looking up aerial pictures of each nuclear site, you get around 96% of the sites are surrounded by farms. The rest are surrounded by apartment buildings and everything else. So they insist that the basic driver behind the interest in nuclear power would not change as a result of Fukushima. This is the latest, greatest scumbag, the UN. He replaced Pinhead over here, to your left and right, with this guy got the job. And he's vicious. He hates puppies. He hates everything. MIT, who supported nuclear power for 99 years, is it? This year, I think. Next year's the big centennial anniversary for scumbags. And Abby, we got a picture of Abby, actually. Hi, Abby. Hi, Dana. They're going to send these robots into a nuclear meltdown. Now, the idea of this story, and there's quite a few of these stories that showed up originally. This is March 28th, 17 days after the tsunami. Oh, we're going to send some robots down. They can clean up Fukushima, so don't worry about it. Capable of doing everything, including clearing debris. And so the journalist's job is to cut your throat as quick as you can so that you don't ask any more questions. Founded by an MIT professor, retired professor, Rodney Brooks, Colin Engel, and Helen the Monster. According to Vice Admiral Joseph Dwyer, Chief Operating Officer at iRobot, no connection to the military there, I'm sure. The company sent 2 PackBots and 2 Warrior robots to aid the Japanese. See, they took these shitty little robots and gave them great names. Now they can't use it no more. Which is pretty cool, actually. To aid the Japanese without ever receiving a call for assistance. Japan not letting anybody near the nuclear reactors. Even today, you bring a camera there, they'll put you in detention for 30 days. And your camera won't be looking like a camera when you get it back either. I can tell you that much. It'll look like a tin can. They can survey the environment and report back. Ho ho, says the crazies. Yeah, I can no longer deny that a journalist is the most evil, the scariest creature on earth is a journalist. As soon as they go and university want to be a journalist, they should be arrested and locked up for the rest of their lives. They're a dangerous creature. Now, that's my opinion. That's just my opinion. I'm just saying, okay? You don't have to agree with me. I don't give a shit. And they hate your guts. And if they weren't around, our planet would be a hell of a lot better, I can tell you that much. There'd be birds and bees and flowers and what happened and what needs to be done. Fukushima. And I apologize, scumbag is a difficult creature to talk about. And there's, despite the practice, the enormous amount of practice we got. I was once... I wish, I remember when I was young, I was so innocent, right? I missed those days where you didn't realize that the TV was your number one enemy, that the media hated you more than you could ever comprehend. Unless you're around here regularly, it's pretty hard to comprehend how evil this lot actually is. Fukushima, what happened and what needs to be done? Oh, great, another scumbag. This was the 11th of April. This was the 1 month anniversary of the tsunami, 2011. So 1 month later, I think it's incredible to show you these pictures. Like, that's reactor 1, reactor 2, reactor 3, and the furthest one is reactor 4. Well, what's left of it. I done some zooming, make it a little bit easier. So these turbine buildings were incredibly radioactive. Those long buildings right here. This is the seaside towards me. They're the turbine buildings. They're incredibly radioactive because of all the water, right? We talked about that earlier. Which begs the question of, Who's going to fix it? Nuclear scientists ain't going to go there. If you go to Japan to work as a blue-collar worker and you don't speak Japanese, you most likely would end up there or close by. Medusa. So the radioactive fallout that we see in Canada is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The radioactive fallout that you see in the United States is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. The radioactive fallout you see in Australia, New Zealand, and everywhere else is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. This is the plutonium mixed oxide reactor. There's literally nothing left to the building, reactor 2. And that's the one they show you constantly. Typically, most of the stories we cover will have that picture. That's the administration building. Nuclear wastelands. These turbine buildings, that's where they were pumping a lot of water, they said, from that directly into the ocean. You can't get near this with a pump or with a hose. You can't walk over the hose if you did manage to get something in there. The hose that would pump the water, if you walked past that hose, you would get a lethal dose. Unless the hose is 6 feet thick, lead, you're getting a lethal dose. See the holes in the roof? Those holes are punched in, right? That was the fuel assemblies coming down and landing on the building and going through the building. They weigh around 1,800 pounds. And they were ejected to great heights. And this is why there's highly radioactive anything in that building, is because fuel assemblies, which is typically like 100 rods, fuel rods each, went right through the roof. Right, and you can see the roof is pushed down. It's not punched out, right? So the tsunami didn't punch anything down through the roof. That was the explosions, the detonations. And so, and the hole is straight down. It's not like it crashed into the roof, for instance, where it tore up a whole chunk. It's a punch straight down through the roof. And that would have meant that they would have landed. This is right by the seaside now. On this side, the whole site would have been covered. What's really interesting is that building there is reactor 4, and you can't see, just slightly over is the common spent fuel pool, which is all pixelated in the typical pictures. Because, you know, they love you so much. And alongside of reactor 4 is reactor 3. Well, it was. Alongside that was reactor 2 and reactor 1. So if any of these detonate, you can't get near the other ones. And when they all detonated, and there's 8 fuel pools with around 4 reactor cores in each fuel pool detonating, you're in another dimension. One way of looking at the drama. A nuclear scientist, nuclear academics are pretty rotten creatures, but a journalist can give them a run for their money, I've noticed. As unfolded around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactors is as a narrative with one central plot. And when I read that, I said, oh, great, this is going to be another one of those shows like last night, is it? It's a very long story, unfortunately. We're not going to try to challenge all the lies, because that took us 2 hours and 14 minutes last night to cover a single story from the New York Times. Was it the New York Times? Don't remind me, I don't want to know. Withdraw the question, my apologies. That was a nightmare trying to get through a single story last night and challenge every one of their lies. And that was from day 5, right? And so the cover story was clear on day 5. That has never changed. That was clearly United Nations. IRPA, ONSCLEAR, the IPRC, the International Atomic Energy Agency. They have a whole roster of the nuclear subsidies at the UN, the military industrial, the military industrial complex. There's 195 militaries, right? And they've captured the planet now. They own this planet. That has unfolded around the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear reactors is a narrative with one central plot and a number of subplots distracting the attention. So one way of looking at the drama is a central plot and a number of subplots distracting the attention. My goodness. It's shocking how evil becomes so natural. Once you're a journalist and your job is to cut everybody's throat. Do you get it? What's going on? However, the fuel in a nuclear reactor continues, no matter which journalist we cover, they do the same thing. They cut your throat. Every one of them. However, the fuel in a nuclear reactor continues to produce considerable amounts of heat, even when fission is stopped. Fission never stops. That's why it's so dangerous. It's continuously. Fission is splitting atoms. Splitting of the atoms never stop. Hang on. My apologies. I gotta try with some hot tea. Oh, that's great. Didn't slurp on one, but I slurped on the other one. I apologize. I turned the audio down and forgot to do it the second time. A lot of work. However, the fuel in a nuclear reactor continues to produce considerable amounts of fission. Not heat, but fission. And heat, of course. And the key task, the main plot in this drama, because that's what a journalist's job is, just to make you incapable of comprehending it, is to keep water circulating over the fuel to remove the decay heat. The main plot in this drama. The loss of power to pumps led to water in the pressure vessel boiling and the fuel heating up. Now this is, was it 17 days later? I can't remember now. Like this picture was available to everybody anyway at that time. Every journalist would have seen these pictures. And so to come out with a story with the narrative that he's using, well, he didn't write it. Obviously, it's written by International Atomic Energy Agency. He put his name on it. These are just it's heartbreaking that is how the world actually now works. Well, it's been like that for quite a long time, clearly, but everything is like that now in journalism. The zirconian alloy can't, because that's the only way they can get away with it. They have to have symmetrically throughout the entire journalists, universities, and key government positions all have to regurgitate the exact narrative for the lie to work. Because otherwise there's a descending voice. They can't have that. That's why you don't see any views on my videos. What do we got here? Am I kicking ass tonight? 18 concurrent viewers. Yeah, I know I've only been doing it a decade, but you think I'd get a few more. 24 likes, but only 20 votes. Now, typically, if they're not interfering, I'll get more votes than likes. So to get less votes than likes is not going to be a good night for Dana. Should cowards like nuclear scientists and academics work at Fukushima someday instead of the homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, the immigrants who don't speak the language? I don't know, Dana. That's it's pretty insane. And the zirconian alloy cans that contain the fuel pellets, which are also coated with zirconium, burst, and it's probably that some fuel melted. Now, it's a criticality, a chain reaction happens. So the zirconium cladding alloy cans, they're calling them, zirconium will catch fire when it's exposed to oxygen. But once the pellets are catching fire, they don't need oxygen. You can have them completely in the bottom of the ocean, put them together, plutonium, uranium, and they'll fission. Enrico Fermi, that's how he actually caused the first reaction, right? Was a neutron source and the uranium, and then they moved close to each other, and then they started a chain reaction, and they pulled it apart again. And I'm sure his helper worked out just fine. And one of these days, I'm going to travel to his gravesite and piss on it. And if I'm there for a week every day, I'm going to go there and piss. Every time I got to take a piss, I'm going to take a taxi to his gravesite and piss on it. So the zirconium alloy cans, they'll catch fire. The uranium at 1800 degrees, they'll burn. That'll ignite the plutonium uranium pellets. And then they'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. So when they talk about it's probably that some fuel melted. No, once it starts melting, everything goes. I don't know. Let's look at the buildings again. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, everything goes. Though we cannot yet be sure about this. That's what I mean. A journalist. If you take off their human face, you're left with nothing but a monster, right? Now remember, this was the 11th of April. Oh, that's right. It was exactly 1 month later. So he would have seen that picture over there. You can't write everything he wrote and not know that picture was over there. The fuel pools were at the very top of the building, same as the reactor core. That's Medusa. Like, it was not part of his plot, apparently. Though we cannot yet be sure about this, said the sadistic demon. Too much pressure would burst the seals in the pressure vessel and allow material to escape. So it was necessary to vent the gases. How'd that work out for you, I wonder? You're talking about a month later. This is 6 days later, basically. I mean, that picture was taken a few weeks after that. But any pictures, and we have pictures from, around day 6, and that's what they look like. So you can't vent something with lethal doses, because reactors, you can see that there, it would have blip, blip, blip. It would have ejected the reactor cores from the fuel pools also all over the site. You're not venting anything because there was no power for 1,200 miles. The whole coastline got ripped off the coast. There was debris floating. The debris that was floating out in the ocean after from the tsunami was 2,000 square miles. It was the size of Texas. Bear with me. So, this is going right through the nuclear plant. There's nothing going to work there after that happens. Remember, this thing came in at around 400 miles per hour. And that's the last picture anybody ever got of him. And then when that stuff hits, when that water goes through the communities, do you see any telephone poles lift? Small amounts of radioactive material which is leaked from the broken fuel rods. Look at that again. The Fuel rods are about 100 feet above that. Oh, that's reactor, well, what's left to stump of reactor 3. It's pretty astounding, right, the lies, so that you have no way of protecting yourself. And let's come back to the poll for 1 second. What do we got here? I have 25 likes over there, and I got 21 votes and 19 people on my show. So, like, if I try to go through every lie in this story, we're going to end up just like last night. So I'm not trying to go through everyone, but I want to go through at least 20% of the lies. That could take a while. This was the cue for the first subplot, the explosion in the outer building of Reactor 1 and Reactor 2. It's interesting, on the 12th of March, followed by a similar explosion in Reactor 3 on the 14th of March, caused by hydrogen mixing with air. Well, the hydrogen is created from the nuclear meltdown itself. The explosion is the evidence of the nuclear meltdown. Let's put it that way. The subplot. So suggesting that the outer building of Reactor 1, like this, that was the fuel pool covering. That was the cover around the fuel pool. And clearly the fuel pool is gone at Reactor 1 and Reactor 2 and Reactor 3 and Reactor 4. But Reactor 3 and 4, it's pretty, just one glance at it, anybody that's honest would acknowledge that it's gone. Just bear with me. I'm just going to... Oh, there it is. There we go. Reactor 1. So these trucks were put there to manipulate you. This thing cooked off. The explosion of Reactor 1 is pretty... we have videos of it. Okay, let me go find a video. I'll take a minute maybe. Or 5 or 10. I'm just kidding you. So let me go up here and see if I can find the explosions right quick. I got to drag them down because we talk about this a lot. And you don't want to show it all the time, even though I should. Oh, there's nuclear scientists out there panicking right now. Mom, he's going to show the explosion from Reactor 1 to Reactor 2. Copy that anyway. Okay, so hang on a second. So, bear with me, I'll get there. Dana. So Reactor 3 and 4. 3 is here, 4 is over there. And you can see where one of the fuel assemblies, or a couple, went straight down through the roof of the... And so then they gutted them, now they look like that. All the way to the ground. So they can put covers on it like this, and then pretend they're getting the fuel out like that. And where they claim they're actually in the building getting the fuel out of the building. That's Reactor 3 detonation, that's Reactor 1 detonation. I'm going to play the video, get it out of the way for you. Computer, play. Let me come back over. So this one here, you actually, Reactor 3, you'll see the big chunks falling back down to Earth over there. Just bear with me. going to slow it down to 50%. I can go to 25%. I'm going to move myself in key position here. Bear with me. This is technically very difficult stuff we're attempting to do. So that's the reactor cores and the fuel pools. You see this big stuff falling down? So wait for it. You can see it over there. These are huge, massive chunks where everything else is going up. These big chunks are falling down. That's the fuel pools. That's reactor 1 over here detonating. Let's look at that one more time. Now I'm going to speed it back up. Get my big finger out of the way here in a second. Maybe. La 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 la. You're not going back on that site after that. But a journalist's job is to convince you that they did. Even though clearly they're not on top of the building that doesn't exist. And the fact that they're doing that should at least have you asking a few questions. But Richie should be packing up to head to South America. It's never too late. Like, it's awful what they got done to us. It's the worst. By far, this is the worst thing can happen to 8 million species and a human species on top of that. So they put these contraptions on top of the buildings. It's really something, isn't it? And then claim they're in the buildings. The plume covered the entire planet. It covers the entire planet. And all the models, this is the French model of 1 million to 10 million atoms of cesium-137 per cubic meter of air. To your left is also a model of the cesium after 26 days covering the entire planet. Remember, they picked up 30 million one-ton bags. But they continue to grow food right alongside the one-ton bags of radiation and shipping it worldwide. It's hard to appreciate. It was 150,000 sites to store the 30 million one-ton bags that we know about. I gotta go looking now, back from my spot. I think it was 1800. See how bad my memory is this time. Oh, my goodness, I think we're there. That's where we left off reactor 1, right? Unfortunately, I got to come back up and post some of those videos and pictures somewhere a little bit more accessible so that I can find it next time. Instead of going through the... Oh, I don't care. It doesn't bother me that much, I suppose. What bothers me is there's nobody else educating the population. And that's a little bit concerning. This is why I work really hard, because I'm trying to create a million little bastards. No offense to you bastards, but trying to create a million little... I use the word bastard as an endearing depiction. Because to the nuclear industry, we're bastards. Because their friends or families or loved ones comes and listens to us, they realize that their loved one is actually a monster of unimaginable proportions. Dramatic as the pictures were, the explosions did not seem to damage the containment. And of course, journalists will not hesitate, not even for a split second, to lie to you. That's their job. On the other hand, an explosive noise from within reactor 2, the least threatening looking reactor, on the 15th of March led to fears that there might be a breach in a part of the containment known as a suppression chamber or the torus. Again, we still do not know for sure. So it just doesn't seem real that so many evil people exist. It just should. Let me try to articulate the madness of what they're talking about. Reactor 2. So this picture here is Reactor 3 and Reactor 2. They're both the same exact replicas. So Reactor 3 over there is right alongside of Reactor 2. So when you look up Reactor 2, that's all you're going to find in Google search, by the way. Back then, anyway. But Reactor 3 was right alongside of it. So for them to suggest, we still do not know for sure, when clearly, when you look at Reactor 3, everything's gone. Officially, they got all the fuel out of the pool of Reactor 3 and Reactor 4, which doesn't even exist. And that there's not an academic on the entire planet, when they looked at these extinction event machines, didn't understand. There's not a nuclear scientist or nuclear academic or professor or nuclear company on the planet that looked at that and didn't know the fuel pool and the reactor cores were gone. And so they all, in order to keep their jobs, they had to come out and cut your throats because they love you so much. They ask for so little and they give so much. Everybody gets cancer because of the nuclear industry, and heart problems and liver problems and lung problems and respiratory, pituitary and thyroid and adrenaline and Alzheimer's and dementia and autism and diabetes and Down syndrome and schizophrenia. We're supposed to thank the nuclear academics and journalists. By now, with no power available on site, the water levels inside Reactor 1 to 3 was sinking and the fuel was seriously overheating. Freshwater supplies ran out, so a decision was taken to switch to seawater and to inject it from the fire trucks through a fire extinguishing line. Like when you look at this site, there is no fire extinguishing line. There is no. When the tsunami ran through the site, that was the end of the party time right there. You ain't doing jack shit after that. And on day one, the reactor, on day one, like, so the tsunami that ran through the site is the same tsunami that ran through these towns right alongside of it, right? Hang on here. Oh, I grabbed the wrong picture, did I? Not necessarily the wrong picture, but the same picture. You're talking about just an absurd amount of the coastline. I got a map for you. Absurd amount of the coastline. So the red are where people died in the tsunamis, and the yellow is where people are missing. It's around 1,200 miles of coastline, apparently. By now, with no nuclear power available, with no power available on site, well, a nuclear plant runs on external power, it can't run on its own power. And just trying to run the pumps, which need 1 million gallons a minute each for each reactor, needs 1 million gallons, 4,500 tons a minute. So with 6 reactors there, they need their own coal plant, their own gas plant. And that's what they do. They have their own coal, gas, oil, dedicated, massive, same amount of energy as you would with a nuclear plant, dedicated to run a nuclear site. And so the whole nuclear site is the most energy. I like to see their energy bill. It'll blow your mind. Nuclear is strictly about making weapons. That's what it's for, right? Energy is a byproduct of trying to cool it. And that's how they sold it to you. It never would have sold if the truth was even whispered. Freshwater supplies ran out, so using seawater, the sulfur, they knew from nuclear ocean testing detonations, which is the same as a nuclear war, by the way, same radioactive fallout. Doesn't matter if you use a nuclear weapon. It cracks me up sometimes because, random times that I've talked to people when they talk about nuclear weapons, and I have to, no choice but to correct them. I say, do you really think that a nuclear bomb test is different from a nuclear bomb in a war when it comes to radioactive fallout? Are you really suggesting that to me? Because they have, right? And they just get sucked into the media, and they start regurgitating whatever they heard that was imprinted into them through propaganda. The operation is continually estimated, suggesting that the water levels are now above halfway up the fuel at the reactor cores 1 and 3. This is 30 days later that they wrote this story. When you talk about reactor 3, remember, reactor 3 doesn't exist. Neither does reactor 4. Power is back to the plant as a whole. Do you really think they connect the power back to the whole little plant? Does anybody think that? You don't connect power. If you don't, there's no one going there. It's a suicide mission. It's a kamikaze mission, right? The second subplot centers on the spent fuel ponds. And so the idea of calling it a pond is to make it seem benign and innocuous and harmless, right? Where fuel has been taken out of the reactor is cooled for. The fuel pools, which got nothing to do with ponds, by the way, or pools. It's just the mental lies they tell, and they believe, eventually, because they tell the lies all the time, they believe their own lies, clearly. Because you'll see them like going to universities and schools and doing presentations, and you're like, you watch these presentations, it's just, every sentence is a lie. And you're like, that takes talent. It takes a very mentally sick person to do it, but that takes talent to go in there, and like this journalist, well, they got, the latitude of just sitting there and writing stuff. For an academic to go in and talk to high school students to encourage them to come join the nuclear industry, basically, and talk for a whole hour and tell a lie for a whole hour is extraordinary dedication to being a monster. Right? They should get there should be a Nobel Prize for monsters, and they would have to give out around 300 million Nobel Prizes a year to journalists and academics. For some months, it's cool for decades. It's not cool either. It's just to stop it from spontaneously going into a chain reaction, because it's still splitting atoms. And if they can't contain those atoms, they're released up to tall, skinny stacks in the form of water vapor, where they're immediately liberated into the environment. And the biggest amount will fall close to the site within a few miles, and that's why they're surrounded by farms, so they can destroy your life. And the implications of over 400 nuclear power plants surrounded by farms worldwide should frighten the daylights out of you. It's just the most terrifying thing conceivable. And the world is just sound asleep. I'm invisible. I'm special. Nothing can hurt me. And then this one I think is Montebello. What's interesting about these is they're always freshwater or seawater. If you look at the Great Lakes are completely surrounded by nuclear disease factories, nuclear power plants, nuclear dumps. I mentioned I got to go show it now, don't I? So when you look at these Great Lakes, what you're looking at is all the nuclear fuel fabrication facilities in the United States, nuclear dumps, not all of them, but the majority of them, are on the Great Lakes, the biggest aquifer on the planet, the third biggest one on the planet, rather, is completely destroyed through contamination from perpetually emissions. And every nuclear power plant is surrounded by farms, typically. And it goes a lot further than what you're looking at right there, as far as you can see. Let me see if I got a better picture for you. Why did the farmers build all their farms around these nuclear plants? No. Why did a nuclear plant build their nuke disease factory in farmland for? Why do they hate you so much? Because the intentions is to poison you. That's the only reason they done that. And that's symmetrically out of almost all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms. The tall, skinny stack is hemorrhaging the radiation from the fuel pools. And the reason the farms are there is to remove the radiation out of the local 10, 20, 30 mile radius. So people like me and you don't go there and find a hot spot with our Geiger counter. That's very, like a Geiger counter is almost useless, but it's okay. Like I still use mine. Mine's clicking away at 285 counts per minute right now. And 85 was a number that most plants would use as an evacuation zone. We're still a couple of hundred counts lower than my house out in BC, right? So these farms, the idea is to move the radiation away, and they do that by shipping the food to the supermarkets. That's built into the engineering of the nuclear disease factories. These things hemorrhaging radiation is the biggest joke in the nuclear industry. I'm not going to tell you about it. You might say, no, they can't have that. Until it's taken away for processing. Well, it's not for a couple of months, for decades, or sometimes forever. Right? Like the former Soviet Union's fuel transfer site was been abandoned for almost 40 years. And the cooling pools are outdoors on some of them, full of reactor cores. They don't know what the hell is in it. So they take some of it. They've been trying to minimize it for a while. They take some of it to Mayak in northern Russia, in the Urals, the mountains, and where they reprocess it. And let's put it this way, their quality control is the most frightening thing imaginable. Perpetual plumes. And processing is illegal in Canada and the United States. Even though there is some government laboratories that are allowed to do it, but it's typically not done. They're changing the rule, though, because you can't have small modular reactors without the mixed oxide fuel. And the fuel, the high assay fuel that we're talking about, is military-grade fuel. And the emissions from that are 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. And how are you going to put all these nuclear reactors everywhere? You're going to need, like, La Hague in France has 500 security guards, which is a reprocessing site. And so they want to keep you away is what that's all about. No cameras, no Geiger counters allowed within 10 miles. And La Hague, by the way, is surrounded by farms, like everything else worldwide. I'm afraid to go to supermarkets. I definitely won't be buying anything from Japan. The water supply to these ponds to replace water lost to evaporation was interrupted. Each pool, and calling them ponds is another way of manipulating you, resulting in boiling. So boiling is considered runaway. It's in runaway mode. And so these little tidbits of truth mixed in with all the propaganda is quite telling of how evil whoever actually wrote the article and gave it to the journalist to publish. These are, it's evil on a different level that I've never heard tell of before. But boy, oh boy, do we ever hear tell of it in this industry. It's everywhere in this industry. At Reactor 4, where there was an unusual large amount of spent fuel in the pool, there seems to have been damage to the zirconium fuel rods and possibly a release of hydrogen. There was, at any rate, another explosion which damaged, and they used this for every one of the buildings, damaged the outer buildings. The explosions from hydrogen, the hydrogen is created by the nuclear meltdown. You know, the university, they have psychologists that are studying the students, looking for sociopaths, psychopaths, and then they'll encourage them to join the nuclear industry. Particularly if they're really intelligent monsters. And they'll get educated, and they'll give them tutors, whatever it takes to get them through the school. And then they'll put them in positions of power in the nuclear industry, or the nuclear waste. The United Kingdom, for instance, used to recycle about 2% of its waste. Last year, with a new, younger generation of students, they decided that they were going to recycle 95% of the nuclear waste into your household items and everything else, your kids' toys and your utensils, your forks and knives. Just, there's no need to be that evil, right? There really isn't. But when they look at the legacy of this industry, they figure they got to do that in order to get a job. They got to be that evil in order to, because there's so much evil in that university trying to get the same job. They got to be more eviler than the other students. I remember, it's a long time ago now, probably. Let me see. Like 12 years ago or something. I downloaded all kinds of lectures from Harvard University in a day, and I was watching them. I had them in a playlist, right? And I'd done this for years and years and years. And it was basically Harvard University, Yale University, Stanford, Oxford, Berkeley, MIT, a lot of the shakers and movers. Every day they were uploading courses and everything else, but it was the beginning of the year class, and the students were being introducing themselves to the professors. And this one girl stood up and she said, "I want to exterminate as many humans as possible." And the professor said, now, calm down. This is just the first day. We got plenty of time to get to that. I was in the kitchen, or I was doing something, and I was like, holy shit. And I went back and watched it, and I was just beautiful. The kid, right? This kid, she was just gorgeous. Could have been a model, for goodness sakes. How do I want to kill as many humans as possible? And the professor was laughing it up, right? Because you know what he was going to do with her later? She was going to get good grades. They're so evil, it's natural, see? That was natural. They felt they had to get above the rest. And the other students blew up laughing. They're like, oh, you're the king. You're going to be class president of the nuclear study group. We anoint you, Mrs. Super Evil. So there was an explosion that damaged the outer shell of the building. Have a look at reactor 4. Does it look like it's damaged on the outer shell? I'll give you a hint. There's nothing left. But don't let that stop you. I mean, just because one journalist said it, don't mean all the journalists are bad, Dana. Let's listen to some of the most famous journalists out there talking about reactor 4. They're pretending they're at the top of the building, 120 feet above the stump you're looking at. Just another day in TV.
Reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
La 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 la. Yep. So there's no shortage of monsters. Does anybody, 'cause, I mean, like, these journalists, when you see them, they look like normal people, right? But their job clearly is to cut your throat. It's now necessary to get the water into those ponds, preventing major releases of radioactivity, hence the extraordinary sight of a helicopter. I played the video last night, actually. Dropping water from the air and high-pressure hoses being directed as best as could be towards the ponds through the wrecked outer buildings. Well, let's have a look at the buildings. How bad were they? Oh, well, they're actually gone. It still shocks me after all of these years. It still shocks me the way they lie. Then came the leak of a highly contaminated water from a service pit near Reactor 2, resulting in discharges to the sea from Reactor 2. A 20-meter crack was detected and sealed using a polymer called water glass. To where the contamination came from in the first place remains unclear. So this is fun, isn't it? So not what they're saying is just so hard to digest sometimes, right? But don't worry about those buildings. Don't worry about that. Worry about that building right here. Don't worry about Reactor 3. Worry about Reactor 2. Highly contaminated water from a service pit. So, like, you're not going near these meltdowns, period, anyway. But you're not going to plug a gap. So-called gap. Well, let's look at the original footage that they're talking about. That's what the site looked like that they're talking about. So the building alongside of this one, they went there and plugged a hole with a polymer. Like epoxy, Dana? Oh, okay. A 20-centimeter crack, less than 1 foot, 2/3 of a foot, was detected and sealed using a polymer called water glass. Well, that's amazing. Oh, nuclear scientists are just special. When I grow up, I want to be a mass murderer like them, said their children. And in yet another subplot, wastewater reservoirs on site became full of lightly contaminated water, leaving no space for more heavily contaminated water, requiring a further light, and they got that highlighted, release into the sea. So who are you going to believe? You're going to believe this beautiful, gorgeous journalist? When you take the mask or human face off, that's what you're left with. Traces of plutonium, which may have originated in the spent fuel ponds of Reactor 4, were also detected in soil at the site. The plume covered the entire planet. And I apologize. I know what you're saying. Dana, you promised you weren't going to go and try to cover every single lie in a single story. Because we want to hear stories. We don't want to just one story. And this is the problem, though. I get a little fixated sometimes, and it bugs me that they're telling so many lies. And the reality of it is, I'm not challenging every lie in this story, believe it or not. I know it seems crazy, but this is a plutonium-239 dispersal based on 20 days. Canada completely buried in it. All of Canada. The whole planet is buried. This is only 20 days, though. And that the numbers that they're talking about in that particular study, because they're only talking about a little bit of soil on the site, the plutonium covered the whole planet based on TEPCO's numbers. But those numbers were based on ventings, not based on the actual loss of the inventories from the nuclear meltdown. Excuse me. But you better do, you know. These subplots, though not really going anywhere in themselves, have on a number of occasions made it necessary to take resources away from the main tasks, the cooling of the reactors, the subplots, the fuel pools, you know. Typically got 4 reactor cores in each one. Either because of a need to deal with them directly or to avoid high worker doses while associated spikes in radiation levels pass. But those numbers ain't going to pass. Well, they passed over you and then they landed everywhere around you. To avoid high worker doses while associated spikes in radiation levels pass. These numbers are never going to pass. They never go away. That's true for the whole planet, unfortunately. The top priority is get the pumps working that will keep the cores of reactor 1, 2, and 3 cool as the fuel continues to produce decay heat. Success could be defined as cold shutdown, bringing the temperature down below boiling point. Present, the water temperatures inside the reactor is unknown, but the temperature on the outer surface of the pressure vessels, first off, you are not getting any temperatures from these buildings except for extraordinary ones. There is no pressure vessels, there is no fuel pools in all 4 of the reactors. We are now deep into an extinction level event from the radioactive fallout on top of that. Let me see here. We got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. We got 35 more screen captures like this to get through for this story. Any reason to... Telling a few lies is not good enough for them. This is the cover story. They're coming out with the cover story. And then they expect all the media to read this cover story and then regurgitate these so-called talking points. These are propaganda, right? And I don't know why I do this sometimes, but I do. It's like torture, having to go through as many lies in a single story. Beyond that, it's important to restore a reliable water supply to the spent fuel ponds or to remove the spent fuel to another facility. You're going to remove the fuel from these buildings that don't exist anymore to another facility. Right, so it's very convincing lies, isn't it? And to make sure that any cracks or other breaches, because you got to have that polymer if you find a crack. I don't think there's any cracks in the building because the building basically doesn't exist. In the long term, a decision could be taken to remove the fuel from the cores of reactor 1 to 3 as they done with 3 Mile Island in the United States. And that statement is up for debate. Go watch my presentations on 3 Mile Island and you'll agree with me. So far, the amounts of radioactive material released from the site are very unlikely to cause any detectable long-term health problems. They're really something, aren't they? And the health problems are shocking. I think I showed you earlier, didn't I? Malcolm Grissom is an associate. I did last night for sure. Is an associate fellow of the Chatham House Energy Environment Development Program and a senior research fellow in the Energy Policy Management Group at, you guessed it, the most evil of evil, Imperial College of London, which is where Geraldine Thomas, Dr. Geraldine Thomas, the monster from UK, hangs out. And the 17th of April, some 5 weeks after the earthquake tsunami wrecked the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, and the energy firm in charge of the facility announced a roadmap for recovery. TEPCO stated its aim as bringing the reactors and the spent fuel pools to a stable cooling condition. Clearly, the buildings, the fuel pools and the reactors are gone. And mitigating the releases of the radioactive material. Oh, that's a different story. I missed the headline. I have to look for that. That's a different story, folks. I screwed up. Not that it matters. That's the sad part about this. It doesn't matter because the monster, it doesn't matter which newspaper they work for, the monster is a monster, right? We'll make every effort available to enable evacuees to return to their homes for all citizens and be able to secure a sound life. 2 phases. Radiation doses is in steady decline to be achieved within 3 months. I mean, the radiation never goes away. Nitrogen was pumped into the reactors to make sure there's no more hydrogen explosions. And air filters introduced to allow workers to get into the buildings. You're not putting hydrogen into the building, and the workers can't go in there because they blew up. They're nuclear meltdowns. Anyway, hang on. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. The immediate challenges are to find any more cracks that might lead to leakage. But my brain just started leaking. We delete all of this because otherwise, if I accidentally click, I could lose. Yep, there we go. Terrorists, they're brothers apparently. He's actual nuclear scientist, Operation Long Jump. So they recruited him to beat me up and destroy my life. I can guarantee you they succeeded. There's nothing I can do about it. I just keep coming out trying to help the planet. My life for yours is not a word you'll hear from the nuclear industry, I can tell you that much. Yeah. Where are we to here? Now, fix that eyeball again. Best way to fix your eyeball is stuff your finger on it. Ow! You know how to save a nuclear scientist from drowning? You don't take your foot off his head. Because they can breathe underwater, right? They're like a nuclear chain reaction. They can actually breathe underwater. So if you see one drowning, the best thing to do is you put your foot in their head. And you're doing them a favor, by the way, by doing that. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. And when the bubbles, they don't produce any more bubbles. then you saved them. Don't worry about them. They can live underwater forever. You don't have to worry about stuff like that, little stuff like that, right? Bit of a struggle this week. I'm not full of piss and vinegar. Last month or so, right? Still enough to come out and kick the shit out of the nuclear industry as many times as I can. Let me see. Let's come over and close the poll. Let's come over and close the poll. Should cowards, like nuclear scientists and nuclear academics, pro-nuclear community, work at Fukushima someday instead of all the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society? Is that arrogant for me to say that? Because nobody else is saying it. I think nuclear students should have to work to Fukushima because they're going to quit school the minute they hear that. And we got one less monster on the planet then, right? One less monster. I'm not going to sing because that's not cool. So thank you everybody that voted. You're awesome. You're very, very awesome. And we thank Colin for helping out James Lucid. I know she went above and beyond the Call of Duty. Bless your heart. So awesome. And we're going to call it a night here. I'm not going to hold you up any longer here tonight. Good night. So long. Okay, don't sing, Dana. Don't spoil it by singing. Well, actually, James Lucid got a song that gets a lot of airtime on this show. We're going to play that and call it a night. I'm going to stay out of it because I don't want to interrupt the song. It's such a great song. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Yes, it's true. I'll be back tomorrow night. I don't know. Should I do something different tomorrow night rather than just cover the lies of the nuclear industry? I like to have a nuclear scientist. And I like to, if I was a scientist, I can bring a nuclear scientist and actually cut their head open and look inside of it. Because as a scientist, that would be legal. I have to check my Cracker Jack boxes and see if there's a certificate that makes me a nuclear scientist someday. All right, shut up, Dana. Play your song and have a great night. Everybody, we'll see everybody later.
In the Tokyo Bureau, swirling smoke and neon beams. Chicago division, fueled by heated dreams. Calm down, Charlie calls in, voice smooth as silk. Says, Dana, you're dreaming, don't cry over spilt milk. On Dana Durnford's show, the chatter's turning wild, but Charlie shoots it down with that cool cat style. Unit 3's no killer, no harm to see life. He chuckles in the static, cuts through the strife. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show. With a snap and a grin, Charlie's voice so clear scatters the dread, dispels all the fear. Mux didn't hurt, he croons with a sigh. Science is for thinkers, not a whim or lie. Though Dana and the crowd may shout and roar, Charlie's unfazed, he's heard it all before. His swinging rationale, like a soothing song, says, hold on to logic, we gotta stay strong. Oh, calm down, Charlie, with his nuclear charm. He says starfish are just fine, there's no alarm. His words dance on airwaves with a confident glow. Calm down, Charlie steals the whole radio show.